So the port has been very focused in its efforts over the last couple of decades, and those efforts are paying off exponentially in the creation of jobs and economic impact. We have engaged TTI, Texas A&M Transportation Institute, to assist us with evaluating our economic impacts and job impacts. And we completed one of those efforts back in April of this year. And this is a slide, we keep updating it because we want you to see exactly how far we've come. But in 2012, the port was impacting about 67,000 jobs. As of April, based on 2018, the 2017 numbers actually, it's over 150,000 jobs. And that economic impact on an annual basis has grown from $18 billion in 2012 to just under $100 billion. And those numbers are going to continue increasing. It doesn't, that study and the data that the study was based on doesn't even capture all of the impacts of the recent growth, and some of that growth is still coming online. So we've been discussing among ourselves how frequently do we need to go back and update those numbers, because they're changing so dramatically just in response to everything that's happening in the region, not only in southern Missouri County, but in your region as well. When you look at adding distribution facilities and all, such as Dollar Tree, those can have an impact at Port Freeport as well. You talk about having multiple rail lines in this region. Well, you have multiple ports in your region, which is also an economic advantage to Fort Bend County, and again, why the efforts of this organization are so important. We also looked at Port Freeport's impact on a nationwide basis this year. When you have a federal project, deepening project, and you've got to compel Washington to bring forth their share of the money, it's important to be able to tell them what your impact is on a national basis. So this year we learned that our impact on a national basis is right under 280,000 jobs, and from an economic input basis, almost $150 billion annually, just from the activities stemming from Port Freeport. Some of our other rankings, we were included in the top 10 fastest growing export ports at the end of 2017. I point that out because I expect we'll be in those top 10 rankings again after some of the other energy projects come online. We are also ranked 26th in the nation in total in containers, 19th in the nation in total tonnage, and we moved up just in a single year from 26th in the nation to 19th in the nation, and 10th in chemicals, and that's pretty obvious with us sitting in the heart of one of the world's largest petrochemical complexes. Port Freeport is served by a 46-foot deep channel. We've been at 46 feet since the early 90s. It took other ports in Texas more than a decade to catch up to us. So we've always had the vision and the support of the community to try to stay ahead of the need and have the type channel that can service the size vessels that need to call upon the various terminals carrying the various types of commodities. We also are short channel, 7.5 miles long, and that's important when you look at an ongoing maintenance standpoint and competing for federal funds. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, doesn't always get the amount of money that they need to do all of their, carry out all of their responsibilities for the nation's ports. But ours being such a short channel, the annual maintenance costs are much lower. And I earlier talked about the diversion of the Brazos River. When that was done, that project was completed in the 40s. It had significant impacts from the standpoint that it made Port Freeport on a dead-end body of water. So our siltation was greatly reduced, and anything inside of the intercoastal waterway has no siltation. So it's only our entrance channel that has to be maintained on a periodic basis. And they generally do that in the fall time frame. And I appreciate the Corps doing that because they have a dredge here during hurricane season. in the peak of our hurricane season. So our last storm, when all of our channels with Harvey and everything, all the channels were impacted up and down the Texas coast, we had to dredge en route right after the storm because it was coming to do its annual maintenance work. So the Corps was able just to add on to that actual contract some emergency dredging and took care of our siltation from that storm. So that project is being led again, and the dredge will be in the area in September. So that's another positive thing. We are supporting about just over 900 vessel calls a year. I believe the number's 933. That's moving significant amount of tonnage, 20 million tons right now. That's going to grow, and obviously it's going to grow because we expect to see a 25% increase in the number of vessel moves, and that'll largely be supported by one customer. So that's an understated percentage. We probably should be putting that more about 35%, but we'll definitely hit that mark. We'll talk more about that. And that's largely going to be driven by Freeport LNG. They've had 3 trains of liquefaction capability under construction. They're in the process now of commissioning and bringing online those units. The first one, I think they're expecting a vessel for commissioning cargo next week, and then later this fall we'll have their first export vessel. But once that unit is up and running, then they'll be focusing on bringing the next 2 online. So sometime around next summer, they should have all 3 online. And we anticipate in 2020 that they'll have at least 120 vessel calls. So there's more than a 10% growth right there just from one facility coming online. And then when they're fully operational, we should see about 200 vessel calls a year just from their facility alone. We also support other businesses at Port Freeport. Some of these are private facilities operated privately on private land, and then we have, of course, Port Freeport owns land and has built terminal facilities that we make available to our tenants. We are a landlord port, and we have a large number of tenants, but as you can see, we have Dow Chemical, BASF, Phillips 66, and ME Global and Seaway Crude. They all have their private facilities that are located there on the channel, and we've got to make sure that we provide a navigable waterway to support their commercial movements to global destinations. And then we also are home to CMA CGM, Hogan Liners, Tenaris, Mammoth, Vulcan, Dole, Chiquita, Riviana. Those are all tenants of Port Freeport and continue to be good partners with the port. We've seen significant amount of growth. Everyone's aware of that. We've talked about that for a while now, from the ability to frack and extract the shale gas. That has resulted in over $30 billion in investment in southern Missouri County, and Freeport LNG is responsible for about half of that. There's also been some recent announcements along Chocolate Bayou of additional investments, and we don't think that that'll be the last one. So when we go to Washington, we have a great story to tell. And again, these companies that are making these investments are there because we have deep water, and they can efficiently get their goods to the commercial markets around the world. This is why it's so important that we continue with our strategic initiatives. We have been focusing on the water side. As it mentioned earlier, we have our permit to our chief's report and our congressional authorization to deepen our channel, where it's going to be deepened to depths ranging from 51 to 56 feet, and I'll show you a map in just a moment. We also have been working on our dockside facilities. We need to expand our berths so we can accommodate more vessel calls. Our berth utilization rate is extremely high for what's normal, and this put us to the point that we know it's time to initiate that next investment, so we'll talk about that. We also have a 200-acre multi-modal terminal type facility adjacent to the port. We have been making some investments there, and that investment has compelled one of our tenants to expand their footprint inside the port and into this multi-purpose park. And then, of course, we are very interested in being able to efficiently get goods to and from the port. So we keep on our radar where we can help support other multimodal type activity and development to support that, and Highway 36 is an important part of that. So the channel project, as I mentioned, will take our channel down to depths ranging from 51 to 56 feet. I don't know if I have a pointer or not. Nope, what did I just do? Let's put that back on. Okay, what you see in purple, that goes offshore, and that comes up to the Seaway facility that services Enterprise products. That will be at a depth of 56 feet. And then from the red around to the green, that will be 51 feet. And then the blue will be shallower because that supports barge activity. When we get our channel dredged to 56 feet, we will be the deepest port in Texas. No one has authorization to go any deeper than that. Corpus Christi is looking at a deeper channel to a facility, but they're in the early stages of that process. Looking at our timeline, when I say they're in the early stages of that process, just look at how long it takes from the time you start with the feasibility study to a point you're ready to construct. We've been working at this since 2003, and here we are, 2019. We anticipated beginning construction the end of this year. I left this up here, but the Corps is working on a project to raise levee or dike around the containment area for the material that is dredged in the channel from the intercoastal waterway westward. And they've had a delay on their project, so it won't be available to use until March of 2020. So somewhere after the first quarter, we'll get to start dredging our first increment of the channel. This project is a $295 million project, and I don't know why this does this sometimes. Apologize for the categories that's showing up. We can't figure that one out. It doesn't do it every time. But Port Freeport, as local sponsors, are responsible for $130 million of the cost, and the federal government will contribute about $165 million. And that portion for the local sponsor is being funded through a bond issue that was authorized by the voters of Brazoria County of the Navigation District. They gave us the authorization to issue $130 million in debt, and that will be tax supported. And there's been a history in the Navigation District of supporting the major deepenings of the port, and we're proud that they see the value of that again. I also have to mention that about 70% of our taxable value is coming from the industrial sector of our navigation district. So, but hopefully the next time I come back to speak to you, I will be able to happily report that we have completed at least one increment of the project, and if funded appropriately and managed like it should be by the federal government, then it should be about a 5-year project from start to finish, and that's what we're working on. We'll be going back to Washington at the beginning of October. We're working to compel the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to put the first increment of the project in their 2020 work plan, and then work toward further appropriation for the 2021 President budget. So when you're in Washington, plug Port Freeport in that project. Send your letters. Help be our voice. Together we can make this happen more efficiently. And then to close, again, we mentioned that we support the inland infrastructure development to support the movement of people and commerce. And we continue to participate with the Brazoria-Fort Bend Rail District in evaluating the feasibility of new rail from Freeport to Fort Bend County. And that project, you'll receive a full update on that, so I'm not going to go into any detail, but we are committed to continuing to fund the operations in partnership with the two counties to continue that effort and help them in seeking additional funding to continue moving that project forward. I think there's been I know there has been a lot of work done to assure that the routes that appear or that are feasible are also least impactful, but they're smart routes. So I look forward to seeing those and moving that forward to actually getting down to studying the feasibility. So still a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done with the Surface Transportation Board, but we've got to keep moving the project forward. And Port Freeport is committed to being a good partner in that. But that, along with TxDOT, Highway 36 projects, the things that are happening in this region from an inland standpoint, I consider this area west of Houston in Fort Bend County is almost like an inland port area, and that's what's happening with the investment that you're seeing from your warehousing and distribution facilities. That's what an inland port really is, and that's why you're so important to Port Freeport, and why we think Port Freeport is important to Fort Bend County, because it gives you options. And when this other infrastructure is built out, it will be the most efficient route for moving commerce out from the west side of Houston, and specifically Fort Bend County. So we're committed to continue developing this, and also connecting the port on up into Dallas, Fort Worth, and beyond. This will give us opportunities to move commerce and develop economic activity around Houston, not through Houston. And I think that's important for the long-term viability of this and being competitive. Texas is growing. This region is an example of how fast Texas is going, and it's growing, and it's going to continue. So we're going to work with you to be a part of the solution to efficient freight movement and continuing to grow jobs and economic activity. That's all I have for you today. I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, you have to answer them.